Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
There it is. The whistle goes. Not quite yet for the 2024-25 season, but for the final friendly of Manchester United's pre-season against Liverpool in South Carolina. A very warm welcome to the Manchester United Weekly Podcast with me, Harry Robinson, and Jack Tait. If this is your first time with us, fantastic. I hope you enjoy the show. If you're a regular, welcome back. Welcome to Series 10. 10 series of what we like to think is waffle-free analysis and opinions from two lifelong Reds, me, an Old Trafford season ticket holder, Jack now living in the US, watching from afar, giving the other perspective. And we're buzzing to get started again. After all, it has been a pretty busy summer. We last recorded in the joyous aftermath of that incredible FA Cup final, the mere mention of which still brings a smile to my face, and the image of Kobbie Mainoo grinning, bucket hat firmly glued to his head. Then things were unclear, ever so unclear, and it stayed that way for some weeks. Erik Ten Hag looked set to go. Thomas Tuchel appeared the favourite to replace him, and the tinny chimes of the managerial merry-go-round were on full blast. But then he stayed. An extension in his contract triggered a new coaching staff fronted by the hero of a generation of Reds, Ruud van Nistelrooy, and soon more good signs followed. Joshua Zirkzee signed without much fuss. Leny Yoro followed, but amid a storm of speculation as United beat European champions Real Madrid to his signature. And now the Community Shield is just a week away. More changes to come in the next few weeks, I'm sure of that, but so much to discuss already, and discuss it we will as we watch for a slightly different first episode to the series, United's final pre-season game together. We'll give our opinions on Ten Hag's stay and discuss any new changes in his demeanour since the season began. We'll pick out a few standout players and themes. We'll review pre-season so far, talk about the impacts of that new coaching staff. We'll look at the two signings, Zirkzee and Leny Yoro, who I had the privilege of spending an hour or so with on his first day as a Red, conducting an interview for United's club media. I'll talk you through the day, what he was like on and off camera. We'll talk about Jadon Sancho's return, about academy starlets Toby, Collyer, Harry Amass and Radek Vitek. We'll talk about some unfortunate injuries, about this final friendly, and we'll give you the academy briefing. We better begin because there's a lot to get through. But just before we do, thank you to our patrons whose loyal support last season and over the summer means we can continue to dedicate our time to this podcast for the next season. Those patrons today and always throughout the season will get an extra 10 to 20 minutes of content every episode. And in the bonus Q&A today, we'll talk about the Euros, the Olympics, United Women, fixture congestion, loads more. If you want to sign up, you can on a pay what you like basis. Go to patreon.com/United Weekly Podcast. Jack, first of all, welcome back.
Cheers, mate. I think waffle free might be the biggest mockers you could have put on us for the start of the season. Now we're under pressure the whole time now.
Well, under pressure is what many people involved with Manchester United are at the moment, including the manager who is staying. And it's been some time. It feels like the dust has really settled on that decision, and most of the analysis has been done already. But a couple of months on, does it feel like the right decision to you?
Well, I sort of go back to where we were at the end of the season. I think for the last probably 4 or 5 episodes leading up to the FA Cup final, I think basically every single time we spent at length discussing whether Ten Hag should go, whether he should stay, and what the alternatives were. And I think really what we both sort of came to was that I think if you were making that decision in a vacuum, you'd probably say he should go. But the specific situation and also the lack of great alternatives made it a bit trickier. I think ultimately it probably was the right decision to stick with him. I think you and I both said, I think even though we probably came down on slightly different sides of that coin actually before the FA Cup final, I think we both sort of said we wanted Ten Hag to succeed. This hasn't been like past managers where you're sort of hoping that they will go to some degree, as it has been with the likes of Van Gaal at the end, Mourinho at the end. I think with Ten Hag, there was a broad sort of agreement among United fans that we think he is a good man for the job, and he's conducting himself well. He was a good fit with the club. It was just whether the football could get to the level that it needs to get to. I think it would have been incredibly, like, from a rational point of view, you should not make a decision based on one game. But I do think it would have been incredibly difficult to get rid of Ten Hag after that FA Cup final win. I don't think that would have sat very well with the fans or the players. I think what they've ended up coming to, this sort of middle ground of Ten Hag stays, the coaching staff gets a massive overhaul. Ten Hag sort of gets this new contract, but really it was more of just triggering an option that already existed in the previous one. Probably feels like about the right decision. I always felt that, again, I think probably on balance, Ten Hag should have gone based on last season, but I've never been a Tuchel fan, and him being the main alternative worried me a lot. And so in the end, I'm perfectly happy with Ten Hag staying and all these changes in the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up very well. Thomas Tuchel seemed to be the closest. And there was, remember, in the week around the FA Cup final, my kind of take on it, trying to judge off all the rumours and the speculation, was that it seemed like the potential unavailability of Kieran McKenna as Chelsea looked to make him their next manager might have sparked the new ownership or structure into action, and they wanted to make sure that they got McKenna ahead of Chelsea. Him staying at Ipswich took out one of the really exciting potential replacements
100%.
for Ten Hag, and they were left with some slightly less exciting ones, and Tuchel seemed to impress them a lot, but in the end walked away. As you say, we came down on different sides. I was of the opinion that given the lack of stability around the rest of the club and the many changes, that sticking with Ten Hag would be a good idea. I think we'd also seen a lot of promise in the way that he's used young players in particular, and we'll talk about that in pre-season as well and what might be coming up. But also fundamentally, when we talk about potentially an United manager, we talk and we look for experience. And 2 years managing United is the best experience you can have. And we're looking at, we'll get onto all of this, but a couple more injuries in pre-season. He has a season of lessons learned. And you would hope he has learned a lot of lessons, because you're absolutely right. Last season was at times diabolical and he needed to learn those lessons. But you hope with those lessons learned that we go on to do much better things. We are watching the final friendly of pre-season. Liverpool have just taken the lead. What have you made of the start to the game so far?
Well, Casemiro has just been done on the edge of the box by someone 15 years younger than him, so it feels kind of familiar to last year, really. I mean, the start's been all right. We've moved it about okay, and we've had possession, got in some decent positions down the left-hand side. Ahmad had a shot very early on. I don't think it's looked that different from the rest of pre-season, which in itself I don't think has looked that different from last year, really. Yeah. But, we'll come on to the rest of that in a second. It's an interesting game, the fact that it's in South Carolina. I was reading a great article on The Athletic about how the University of South Carolina managed to get this game, it being in quite a small town, but in, these massive stadiums in college towns and throughout the country. It's an interesting sort of experiment, but I mean, it looks absolutely packed.
Yeah, it's also very interesting. It's a strange experience for me watching in the middle, well, not quite the middle of the night. We're nearing 1 a.m. for a 12:45 kickoff. This is obviously something that listeners in Asia or Australia will experience all the time. It's kind of the opposite for you, based in the US. You're normally watching at 7 a.m. sometimes, or middle of the day. Yeah,
12:30 kickoffs, so 6:30 in the morning for me here.
Yeah. We'll get on to pre-season and whether there's been any changes in the style of play. One thing it feels like there has been a bit of a change in is Ten Hag's demeanour, and that's kind of understandable with an extra year on his contract. Yeah. I've enjoyed, I think, when he's been at his best, and this is included in last season, even when results were going poorly, but particularly in the season before, when he first arrived at United and declared that era's come to an end. That was a fantastic line, and who knows whether that'll be able to be used in the magical montages in years to come if Ten Hag is to dethrone Liverpool and Manchester City. But you also had the kind of mind games before the Newcastle Carabao Cup final, where he talks about them keeping the ball out of play and keeping the game time down really low. There were some other really bullish moments, and it felt like we missed that, and we got quite a confused, stubborn Ten Hag in press conferences for a lot of last season. And then towards the end of it, after the Arsenal game, as we went towards the City game, and it seemed that he'd kind of become comfortable with his fate, whichever way it was, and he was going to just start arguing for himself. And it feels like that's carried on. And obviously he's going to be more comfortable now. He knows he's got a little bit of job security, but he seems comfortable in himself, and I'm enjoying the way he's talking about the players, and I enjoyed the way he said things were below standard after the first friendly at Rosenborg, and good signs.
Yeah, to be honest, I think he's speaking like someone who, like you said, has a little bit of job security, but also I think knows that he doesn't necessarily have a long-standing relationship with this regime. You know, the new Ineos, the Ineos hires that have come in and are now running the club. I think he sort of knows that he's got to prove himself all over again to these new people. And you can sort of see that in the way that he's talking. Everything's about this new relationship, but he's not waxing lyrical about that new relationship, how much he loves everyone. It's more, things are good, we're communicating, and now we have to go out and sort of back this up on the pitch. It's still someone who is kind of advocating for himself, but not in the way that, say, a Mourinho or a Conte do at clubs, where the advocating for themselves comes at the expense of the club. It's more Ten Hag wanting to, raise up the level of the entire club around him, and I think hoping that Ineos will do that around him. I think the big change from Ten Hag and the backroom staff too has just been how much more visible that relationship between Ten Hag and now Omar Berrada, Dan Ashworth, Jason Wilcox. Those figures have been themselves much more visible, but also their relationship with Ten Hag much more visible. There was a story, I think Andy Mitten said a few days ago, that he saw Ten Hag talking to that group of people literally just in the stands at UCLA after training last week.
Yeah, the
kind of thing that you would never have seen under the Glazers, and Ed Woodward and then John Murtough after him.
Yeah, I remember doing some work at Carrington back in possibly January, very early on after the ownership had been done, and going over with someone I was talking to watch a little bit of the behind closed doors friendly against Burnley, and so Dave Brailsford walking along and coming to kind of cast his eye over everything, and that was very early on. And I think it's that presence can be. I think at some clubs that presence can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But even you think about Chelsea under Abramovich, and most of the players talk about that and our views. We don't have to go through our views on Abramovich and Chelsea and whatever, but the players, forgetting all the moral side of it, the players seem to enjoy his presence in the dressing room.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna give you a bit of historical nerdery, but when we spoke about the similarities between James Gibson, United's president from 1931-32 until he died in 1950. One of the big things the players said back in the very early parts of 1932 was it's fantastic how present the club president is around, and he greets us after training, he asks us how things are going, he says, is there anything we can help you with? It's a very different era, things are slightly different, but I think players appreciate that, and I think they appreciate the fact that if they did have concerns about whoever or about something at the club, that they would be able to meet these people. And I also think, it's important for Ten Hag. I think one of the other things is the change in part of the club's ownership means he feels he can be a bit more honest about the problems that he encountered when he arrived. There was a really interesting quote that he said, this was in conversation with Dutch media. He said, so many people advised negatively when I started at this club. I could have gone into projects with much better conditions and with much better structures, but I chose Man United. I feel this is my club. I want to go for this challenge, although I knew this was very tough and very hard. Only when you are in, you realise, paraphrasing now, many obstacles to overcome, and we're trying to accelerate this process. I remember Van Gaal publicly advising Ten Hag not to join United at the time, and I imagine privately there were many, many more. And that honesty and openness feels quite refreshing, but also, again, it's going back to your point. He's advertising himself. So what to you, as kind of not as a cynic, but as someone who thought he should go and thinks he probably should have gone, because you're going to give a more interesting answer than me, what are the key markers of success for him next season? Not the club overall, but for him as the manager.
Well, the easy one is where we finish in the league. For any manager, that's number one. I think getting back into the Champions League would probably secure him his job security no matter what, I would say. I then think the sort of things that are slightly more abstract, but also that can be achieved in the shorter term, because there is there is a scenario here where, Ten Hag might not even get to the end of the season if certain other things are going badly enough before then. So I think those other things are developing some of the really undeniably good young talent that United have at this point. In Leny Yoro, Hojlund, Ahmad, Kobe Mainu, Garnacho, that group.
It's exciting,
albeit they may not all start. It's exciting, and they probably won't all start every game. A few of them probably will. I think that is probably the biggest short-term marker that Ten Hag can have, because those players are the future of this team. At least you've got to imagine that they will be. We already saw last year Garnacho, Mainu, Hojlund, that famous picture of them celebrating on the advertising hoardings at Old Trafford. It was those three. You've now added Leny Yoro to that. I think Ahmad is maybe still slightly on the outside of that, probably the one whose part as an integral piece of this team is probably still up for some debate, but looks like he will probably be given a chance to prove himself at the start of the year. I think the development of those players is going to be a really, really big thing. And then the third one, which is maybe slightly more difficult to know how that's going, is going to be this sort of notion of the style, whatever approach United want to take into every game that we play. That's sort of been, I think, the biggest knock on Ten Hag outside of results last year, which I think, as the whole argument about him last season was how much can we really put into this because of all the injuries, the uncertainty and everything like that. Outside of the results, I think the style was really the biggest criticism that most people had of Ten Hag. Certainly the biggest one that I had of him. I think what you're looking for from him is some idea, and I think this is both something he needs to do, obviously, on the pitch, but also off the pitch too, in interviews. He needs, I think, to do a better job of articulating the vision that he wants this team to sort of work towards. Something for fans to understand. This is what we're trying to do in every game. This is the way that this Man United team wants to play. This is what Ten Hag's Man United stand for. It's something that I don't think we know. And again, we'll get onto pre-season a bit more. I don't feel like I'm that much closer to understanding it after pre-season. But for me, that is a really, really big piece of the puzzle that he needs to get right.
But ultimately, I think he's going to require some pretty strong results.
Yeah.
Before November. You think that's kind of the earliest time? I mean, you take Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's season. You'd struggle to be dismissed at United, which I agree, quite a patient club when it comes to managers and a very patient support and trusting support. You'd struggle to be gone before October, certainly, but probably before November. He needs some strong results.
I think the Yoro injury in particular has probably cemented that as well.
Yeah, and
because if things start going wrong while Yoro's still out, there's always, I think, going to be the crutch to fall back on of, we don't have our biggest signing of the summer.
Yeah.
So,
but also, I just think the way in which he's managed United, both in press conferences, as you say, not often articulating the progress of the style as well as he has done about the progress of the club, but also just the kind of pragmatism that we've seen in changing that style of play often. He has made himself a kind of results manager for now. So, yeah, he's made that for himself.
Yeah.
The new coaches are really exciting, and there shows a bit of a balance of people that Ten Hag obviously has recommended and trusts and is excited by in Van Nistelrooy and René Hacker and the new goalkeeper coach, Ten Rudevar, and then someone who Jason Wilcox worked with at Southampton in Andreas Jorgensen. What's pretty amazing, and I don't think I've heard of this happening at another club and is quite exciting, is 3 first-team managers have just joined United, none of them as the manager. Ruud van Nistelrooy, who has managed PSV Eindhoven. You had René Hacker, who's just done a great job with Go Ahead Eagles in Eredivisie, and Andreas Jorgensen, who's been managing Lillestrøm in Scandinavia.
It was 4 until a few days ago when Steve McLaren was confirmed as Jamaica boss.
Yeah, very, very true. Can you think of any examples like that?
Not off the top of my head, to be honest.
No. You often get assistant managers who have tried out management and then drop back into the assistant's role. But to have so many of them, and that's pretty exciting. The experience you gain from being a manager, even if you're not then suited to doing it for the rest of your career, is so valuable. And the mix of, you've got some serious kind of expertise. The goalkeeper coach sounds pretty exciting, quite innovative, quite different. You never know, that innovative streak could end up having a negative impact. You don't know. But something exciting. Interestingly, Ten Hag said he spoke to him as early as February but couldn't make a firm offer because he didn't know whether he was still going to be at United. He's pulled out of a deal to join Ajax to come to United. You've got a new emphasis on set pieces from Andreas Georgsson, who worked with Wilcox at Southampton, and then Ruud. And you're a couple of years older than me. And if there's anything I know about the generation just above me of Manchester United fans, for me, my hero was Wayne Rooney. And I think for people it's not really a generation, is it? Because mini generation. But for people who grew up watching, like my first team was the Rooney, Ronaldo. Anderson was one of my favourite players as well. But Rooney for me, Ronaldo for a lot of other people. But the mini generation above mine, if there's one hero, it is United's new assistant coach. So how happy are you to see Ruud van Nistelrooy back at United?
It's great. It's a lot of fun. I think I've mentioned this before, but one of my earliest memories as a fan. So I would say I'm probably a couple of years too young to fully appreciate what Van Nistelrooy did. I was my sort of earliest memories of United are probably I really remember us beating Millwall in the FA Cup final was it 04 and then losing on penalties in 05 to Arsenal. But I've mentioned this before. When I was growing up, I had a DVD of. It was a season review of the 2001-2002 season, which wasn't actually the best season for United. I think we came third that year, played Deportivo loads in the Champions League, I remember. But it was one of those things that you get home from school and if you had nothing to do, you just stick it on. It was on video at the time, on VHS. And I just remember sitting back and watching Van Nistelrooy over and over again in that season. We had a black away kit that year with the Vodafone sponsor. And I have such a strong memory of him just bullying people in that kit. And for me, seeing him back is so exciting because I felt like I got a glimpse into his brilliance and sort of wasn't quite old enough to appreciate it. I mean, for my money, what I can remember, he is, I think, probably the best pure centre forward that United have had in my lifetime. Rooney would probably run him close.
Best in the box striker.
Yeah. Best pure goal scorer for sure. And I mean, what he did as a player was incredible. And, he has, to your point before about all these actual managers on the coaching staff for United, I think what's unique about it as well is that these aren't managers that flamed out, that did badly in their jobs. Van Nistelrooy had a really good record in the Netherlands. It's not necessarily a one-to-one thing of great player equals great coach, but Van Nistelrooy has proven in the past that he is a very good coach. He can be successful as a manager. You can only hope that the kind of things that he's going to pass on to Hojlund, Rashford, Amass, now Zirkzee as well, are going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and I think back to when Ole was manager and the impact that he could have, particularly on Rashford. I remember one of his big things was there was one thing about making sure that he was getting his head in the right places and he was really dying to score goals. But one of the really big things they worked on was that composure, where he basically argued that Rashford, when he didn't have time to think about his finish, was brilliant, but when he did, was less good, and he needed to make sure his decision-making was spot on and his composure was spot on, and Rashford got much better at that and became a very good one-on-one finisher and scored a lot of important goals in that way. To have another elite striker like that is a massive bonus. You've also got the aura of Van Nistelrooy on the touchline, in training. I can't wait for that first game at Old Trafford against Fulham in the Premier League. The Community Shield will be great, but that first time at Old Trafford when Van Nistelrooy's walk comes out of the tunnel and you're going to get, for the first time in many a year, Ruud around Old Trafford. It'll be brilliant.
I don't think any assistant manager will have got a big cheer at any club, I would guess.
Yeah. And the other really important thing is standards. It's never a bad thing. And this isn't going to... It's not a magic fix, because we saw there were plenty of problems in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's dressing room at United, and the standards were too often not hit in games, and we imagine in training as well. But it's a good thing to to have someone who knows what training looked like at United when we were at our best. And you've now got Van Nistelrooy, who knows, Johnny Evans, Darren Fletcher, Tom Heaton as well, who were all there when they know what the levels were like, and you'd hope they will have that influence and be able to bring us to that level again. Right, we're about half an hour into United Liverpool. There's been some interesting goal-mouth action, hasn't there? In terms of, there's been a few chances. Mason Mount had a really early one saved. Amass had a couple of chances.
We've responded quite well, to be fair, to going one behind.
Yeah. Pre-season started with Rosenborg, a very young team. Then we've had Rangers, Arsenal, Real Betis, and this is the final one. Overall, any real big conclusions before we get on, not specific players, but any real big conclusions? Doesn't feel like there's been a huge amount to learn from it.
Yeah, it's been pretty similar. I would say probably the one sustained difference I've seen, I think we've been a bit more aggressive in our press, especially with Mount in the team. I think he's often been the one kind of leading that.
Yeah.
I think largely, though, it's been the same good things and the same issues. Good attacking intent when we have space to work in. Slightly more difficulty, I think, when teams are a little bit more compact. Still getting played through a bit too easily, especially with Casemiro in midfield being bypassed a bit too often. Against Betis a couple of times in the first half, they really sort of ripped through us a bit too easily once our attacks broke down. But in general, I think it's been fairly similar to what we've seen in previous years.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Yeah, in terms of the performances, absolutely. The mood feels pretty good. There were a lot of complaints about last season's pre-season and how packed the schedule was, and reports indicated the players didn't enjoy it. Things felt way too restricted. There was too much travel going across the US, which is obviously a massive country compared to the UK, and there's been a clear difference this year. There's been fewer fixtures, and it seems like the mood has been pretty good. There's been some great facilities, some complaints over a couple of the pitches, and that is a problem. And I think the pitches in the US have consistently proved a bit of a problem, sometimes at training grounds, sometimes in stadiums. And you do wonder, given the injuries to Hojlund and Yoro, and there was a knock to Ashworth and a couple of others, whether that will be something they consider more going forward, and whether they'll be a bit more picky with the stadiums that they're playing at. With the 2026 World Cup coming up, you're going to have, I think, 8 stadiums overall, which will have to be in essentially perfect condition by next summer or very soon after. So maybe that won't be an issue. But going back to what we were saying earlier about the senior staff being present, and Dan Ashworth, we haven't spoken about the fact that that's got over the line. Good news. Yeah. I don't want to talk about a sporting director for too long. It's good news. Jason Wilcox and Dave Brailsford all being present on tour. It's also just the fact they are there at UCLA or wherever United are training on specific days, the fact they're at these games, they can see what the issues are. And there's been a very clear emphasis on football first as soon as Ineos came in. And you would imagine, these tours are planned months and months and months in advance, and there's parties that go out to do recce's and check everything's okay. So this tour might be kind of the final one of the old era, and things, I don't know, maybe things will stay exactly the same. But the fact they're there means they can see when players might complain about it, what the issues were, and actually have their finger on the pulse, which is a difference to what's gone on before. Let's talk about a couple of specific players.
Yeah.
Ahmad, first of all, the standout player of pre-season, I think it's...
Yeah, without a doubt. He's been fantastic, carried on where he left off at the end of last year. I mentioned before, I think it looks like he's going to be given the chance to start the season, probably getting the most minutes on that right side, and I think he absolutely deserves to. I think there's still probably some, not concern, but question marks over how far he can go at the top level, but he's shown you everything that you'd want to see in pre-season. He's been very, very direct, really, really good driving, cutting inside on his left foot. His ball control in close, sort of confined spaces is excellent. And to be honest with you, a level above any other winger that United have. We have actually a lot of depth, arguably too much depth out wide at the moment. But I think the one thing that Ahmad brings that no other United winger can get close to is that ability to manoeuvre the ball in tight spaces. Even when he's doubled up, he so often wriggles out of it. And he's been excellent all throughout pre-season.
Yeah, he's definitely, you're absolutely right. He's a different player to the rest of them. And some of the things he manages to do on the ball they're just really exciting to watch. And he's a very exciting player. United just gone 2-0 down to Liverpool with, not made the most of our chances at the other end. And seemed like a decent move. I need to see a replay.
By the way, just speaking of that nothing's really been different, how many goals have we conceded from cutbacks already in these last few games? That was another one just there from Liverpool.
Yeah, it's so hard to judge on these games, isn't it? Which is why I'm happy to record while we're watching them. Because
could you imagine if we were recording in the Premier League in November going 2-0 down to Liverpool? I think the mood would be very different.
Yeah, very true. It seems like Ahmad has not just been promised that he'll start the season, but he's speaking to the media. The suggestions he's keen to sign a new contract. He's obviously had really positive talks with Ten Hag and been promised a proper role. There was a lot of fans who complained last season that his playing time wasn't significant enough. I'm sure he would have been really frustrated. He will probably, whatever he does in the rest of United career, never equal the moment he's had already against Liverpool, which is a strange thing, I imagine, for a player, and also just as a fan thinking about it. One of the exciting things to add to that is the competition that it will provide to Garnacho. And Garnacho's been brilliant, is developing really well, but obviously has a pretty significant ego and models himself on Cristiano Ronaldo. It's no surprise. He needs that competition. And it's one of the things I'm really happy with. He went to play with Argentina at the Copa America, doesn't start for a couple of games. I think that's really healthy as well. And he's going to have to work so hard to get into that Argentina team because it's talented. You then got a bit of competition from Ahmad. And if those two things combined mean what we know about him so far, when he needs to do the work, and I'm not saying when he doesn't need to do the work, he doesn't do it. He works very hard. He's worked really hard to get himself here. But that will make sure that a young player doesn't get carried away and really has to kick on. And then you're looking at really healthy competition. But I think you're right. You're then thinking, how do either Antony particularly or Jadon Sancho get into that team regularly? Jadon Sancho coming back is a really interesting one, and he's playing today. He's played plenty in pre-season. Doesn't sound like he apologised to Ten Hag. It seems like essentially an agreement was reached without an apology. I wonder how much of this kind of bringing back together is real and how much it is just to bump up his value and make him seem like we're not desperately trying to sell him. And that I think if any decent bid came in, Ten Hag would be very happy to see him leave, but he's obviously well liked in the dressing room, and it's an interesting one. Ten Hag says we've left it behind us, but I'll be convinced once the transfer window closes. But he's looked sharp in pre-season, and he obviously is. We know he can be a brilliant player. He just didn't deliver it consistently enough while he was playing regularly for United.
Yeah, I mean, I think out wide, if at the moment it feels like United have probably got one too many out there, just in terms of. Yeah. I think if one of those players was someone coming through the youth team, say if it was Garnacho a year ago, you'd probably feel better about it. But these are all senior players on big wages, looking to really be starting every week. You only can get two out of those really five in at the moment. It looks like it'll be Ahmad and Rashford to start the season. Garnacho will be coming back a bit later from the Copa America, which is fine. Antony and Sancho feel like the two that sort of on the outside looking in. It'll be interesting to see how many minutes they get. See, Garnacho offers an option on both the left and the right, which no one else does. But to your point, I do think I think there is still a very good chance that Sancho is not with Man United by the end of the transfer window. If a bid comes in, I think that is really the obstacle. I don't think the obstacle is United umming and ahhing about selling him or Ten Hag not being sure that he has the depth to deal with his departure. I think it's really just a matter of I don't think that anyone wants to take him. And to be fair, I can absolutely see why. You know, why would you spend £40 million on a player who, I mean, he played a lot in the second half of last year, but hasn't played a whole lot of football in the last year and a half, is a quite clearly sort of a depressed asset at this point. I think 40 million is probably steep.
Yeah. Dortmund clearly want him, but don't really have the funds, and even if they did, it's unclear whether they want him that much and whether they think they very rarely are ever going to spend that kind of money. So they would have to be absolutely sold on him.
I think actually that probably the best chance of him leaving might be if there's a player United want towards the end of the transfer window. Things are a little bit tight on sort of PSR side of things, and we need to drum up, 25, 30 million in sales. I think there is a chance that then you might see some movement on it. And maybe at that point, United would be tempted to accept something like a £30 million bid rather than the 40 that has been reported as the number that we're sort of holding out for.
Yeah, some young players standing out in pre-season as well. Toby Collyer has been one of the significant ones in midfield. Harry Amass at left back, of literally just watching them link up inside the Liverpool penalty area. I've spoken them into existence. Collier's a really interesting one. Signed from Brighton back in 2022. He turned 18 a couple of months before. He captained England at youth level. He was rated really highly at kind of 15, 16. But given his reputation, his transfer didn't feel quite as high profile as some of a similar ilk. I don't know if it was just the time United were in. He's now 20. Ten Hag gave him the Kobbie Mainoo treatment after the FA Cup final. He spoke to Mainoo on the pitch at Wembley after the Carabao Cup final the year before, and then essentially said, we're going to win trophies together. You saw him pull Toby Collyer aside for a chat after the cup final against Manchester City. He signed a new contract in July. Ten Hag was there with him. He's impressed in pre-season. I've watched him a fair bit at youth level. I don't know how much you've seen, but in terms of these pre-season games, what stood out to you?
I think what stood out to me is he seems to understand and read the game very well for a player of his age. What you often see with midfielders when they're just coming into senior football is, they're fairly composed on the ball. Things are sort of quite easy for them in terms of their technical ability, just because so many young players now their technical ability is at such a level that they can fit in quite seamlessly on that point of view. But what they struggle with is being able to read the game. The game tends to bypass them a little bit. It's something that, to be honest, Kobbie Mainoo still struggles with at times. I've been really impressed with Collier's ability to step in, especially against Betis after we fell behind. I thought him and the rest of the midfield, to be fair, but he in particular did a really, really good job at, every time an attack broke down for United, vast majority of the time we were winning the ball back in midfield. There was a sort of 10-minute period around, I think, just after we equalised until we scored the second goal, when Betis were just sort of hemmed in over and over again. And that really stemmed from Collyer being able to step in, read the game really, really well, and anticipate where the ball was going to drop. He was doing that really well. You can see there's been a few times where I think the speed at which he's getting shut down is different to what he's experienced in, under 23 level. A few times where he's given the ball away in sort of areas that he wouldn't want to. Again, he's just receiving the ball often from the defence and he's trying to turn when he doesn't have the time, or, trying to make a little carry to 5-10 yards up the pitch and he's getting chased down from behind. Nothing to worry about. It's just that, things are slightly different. The speed, everything is a little quicker at
he can cover ground.
Level, but
he can cover ground with the ball really well.
Yeah.
But he has to improve under pressure. He's a very neat player who can cover a lot of ground and enjoys the dirty work and enjoys the quiet role. What he lacks and what makes me wonder quite how much time he'll get next season is the real quality passing forwards.
Yeah.
And particularly when Kobbie's going to be almost undoubtedly is going to be United's starting midfielder and we will build around him. That partnership to me doesn't quite feel strong enough without a third midfielder in it. So I wonder quite how much he'll play, and I wonder if a really good loan move was possible, whether United would accept that near the end of the transfer window. But I think he'll at least stay around till Christmas, and then if that game time's not materialising, go out on loan from January, which we've seen quite a few times with talented young players in recent years. But certainly impressed.
Does he feel similar to McTominay to you?
He's not. He's not as physically dominant.
Yeah.
I think
seems slightly neater on the ball.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I think given his age, he's neater on the ball. But I think he's got a real. I spoke to him a few months ago. I asked him. I was doing a thing where I was going through the academy players, saying what other sports did you play when you were younger? And he did a lot of running and swimming. He seems to enjoy. He says he still really enjoys running. Like, he seems to enjoy that kind of the burning you get from working hard. So yeah, he's that kind of person. He seems like a very nice kind of additional backup option.
Yeah,
to have.
100%.
And I'm pleased for him, because there was a point where he had to improve, and he hadn't quite. I don't think he'd done as well as United were hoping, and he really has improved, and he's taken his chance in pre-season really well. Maxi Oyedele's also looked a good player. I'm hoping he gets a good loan next season. But Harry Amass as well, a player I think people know a lot more about, was involved loads of times in matchday squads. I think came close to coming on in the FA Cup semi-final, but we then conceded 3 goals, so didn't. So he could have been our 250th academy graduate, but it didn't quite work out in the end. I think he's doing really well. Ten Hag clearly thinks there's a few things he needs to improve, and he's suggested he's at least a few months away from being a first team player. But whether he's saying that just to get in his head and make sure he's not resting on his laurels, or he really believes it, I don't know. I think he probably does need to improve more. He's still quite slight.
Yeah,
you're thinking against a really strong Premier League winger, but also just generally in the game when he might be having to fill in at centre back if United are pushing across or at corners. Yeah, he needs to make sure that he uses his size as well as he can, like Patrice Evra used to do. But the fact Alvaro Fernandez has made a permanent move to Benfica, Tyrell Malacia still has another 2 months out, and Luke Shaw's only just coming back to training after the Euros. Either Diogo Dalot, and we're going to have to see Dalot at left back and Wan-Bissaka at right back again, or the other way round as we did at the end of last season, or Harry Amass gets his debut. And I'd much rather see the latter, because at the start of the season you want to keep this good mood going. Another debut is a fantastic way to do that. Okay, we're going to have a short break because it's half time. So that's the end of part 1 of our pre-season roundup. Part 2 should be available in your podcast feeds right now, only split up to make it easier for you. So if you want to carry on, do so now, or you can come back another time. In part 2, I'm going to give you an extensive academy briefing, including the latest on Chido Obi Martin and James Overy. Who are they? Well, listen to find out. That comes after discussion on United's senior transfers. Jack and I talk about Joshua Zirkzee and Leny Yoro, including my time spent with the latter conducting his first interview as a United player. It was an absolute privilege to do, and very nice to look back on as well. Our patrons will get nearly 30 minutes additional content, extra time you can call it, in part 2. We're going to talk about the Olympics, the Euros, more on Leny Yoro, loads more on transfers as well. And then it'll be back into the normal show for a final review of this Liverpool game. So, see you in part 2. Cheers.
Sports Social Podcast Network.